Hi, I'm Stef Cybichowski. If you just concentrate on the Stef, it was. So I was thinking back to the origins of our difficult relationship, and Sue and I met probably 3 years ago. And I was fairly new to the principles at the time, and I was searching in the area where I lived for other principles people, and unusually there was this hotspot of free principles practitioners and facilitators and coaches. It looked quite unique, and I saw Sue had was advertising for a meetup group, so I thought really good idea to go and say hello, try and work out what it was all about, because I didn't have a clue. So my introduction to the three principles of Sue was, I found her, she was doing a meetup group at her house, and I knocked on the door with some flowers. I had some flowers, didn't I? I was respectful in those days. And I'd seen who else was going to be there, and there was going to be Rudy, there was going to be Peter Anderson, there was going to be Jenny, and pretty much the entire family. And I got to the door, Sue opened the door and she said, "Welcome to the cult." Do you remember that? So that was my initiation into the Three Principles community. And so since then I've done a lot of travelling, I've done a lot of had a lot of sacred conversations about the Three Principles. I'm so lucky now to be able to get to talk to businesses and work with military veterans, talking about PTSD, doing work with aid workers to Syria. So I kind of get to talk to so many beautiful people about this amazing subject. That's me.
Okay. So I'm Sue Pankiewicz. Concentrate on Coltman, which is who I am going to become. I'm going to adopt my married name just as my husband walked through the door. Yay!
That was not a mistake, Peter.
So, yes, so I've been kind of beavering away a bit for maybe 8 to 10 years. I started off learning about this from Roger Mills, Dr. Roger Mills, and then was fortunate enough to meet lots and lots of really, really experienced facilitators. And then I've watched and been thrilled to pieces that just little by little, one by one, sometimes group by group, this is spread. And I'm just thrilled about that. And then, of course, things burgeon. So I think I carried quite a lot of ridiculous responsibility in my head, thinking, there's only about 30 of us in the UK, how are we going to do this? And I did think a lot about that, and I also butterflied between, I could do this, I could do that. And on the way, I've had some wonderful times. I've done some individual one-to-one work, I've worked with groups, I've worked in school, and so on. This is what I love. This is what I love the best now. It's the easy flow of conversation, the connection, and having your family here. Sorry. So we're talking about relationships.
Apparently.
Yeah. So I'm going to start talking about relationships now. And unfortunately, because I was organising all of this, I didn't really think too much about what I was going to say. But it seems to me that along the way, I concentrated a lot on my outside relationships, so my relationships with my family, individual members of the family, relationships at work, which were always actually quite a lot easier. And one day it struck me really, really powerfully that what kind of relationship do I have with myself? And once I began to notice that, I realised it was not really very nice. So I did set to work on that. So I analysed every thought that came into my head about myself, Some days I'd have nice thoughts and I think, oh, it's a good day. And then some days I'd be filled with lots of other thoughts and it wouldn't be such a good day. And then that kind of cleared itself up a bit. And then I realised that all the time there is this other layer of invisible thinking. And you can't really do anything about invisible thinking as if you want to do anything with thought anyway. But what it showed me was actually that wasn't the place to start anyway. It was just what I think we're going to be talking about for 3 days here is that it's the relaxing out of who you think you are. It's a recognition that all you are is your own thought construct. You make up a story about yourself that starts somewhere here when you're about this tall, and it looks real. And I laboured under the reality of that for a long, long time. And as I say, there were some good bits, and there were some not so good bits. But it always felt that it was out of my control. And I just was who I was, and I needed to make the best of what I thought were the good bits and try to hide the other. And it really is tiring, and it gets in the way. So how that for me showed up was it gets in the way of your relationships with other people because you're in your head. I was in my head, analysing how I was doing in my relationships with other people. Was I a good enough mum? How was my relationship with these children? How was I doing as a wife? And and friends. And it really just used to tire me out. And I thought, it has to be easier than this. And that's exactly, I think, my experience of learning about the power that we have to create our own reality includes the power we have to create our own relationships. And that is exactly what we're doing moment to moment. We're creating our relationships. And I would say that right now, the fun, I guess I could say naughtiness, so I think really Jackie's got that one. She's got that one. It's the freshness of it. It's like in the past it was like wading through this hard, difficult story. And now it feels like, well, anything. It's fresh and it's new and it's light, much, much lighter, and more loving, and there's more ease. And that I have a preference for not following resentment, which I used to love, resentment. I was so good at it. And I have a preference for holding my tongue. I have a preference for feeling loving and kind. And that's a really great guide. I am finding that's a really great guide because it's really, really simple. And I've come to like simplicity too. That's having spent years and years in complexity. It's so much easier. And we were only joking at the beginning. I was only joking at the beginning.
Yeah, I love that about the relationship with ourselves. When we begin to see, there's actually Leonard Cohen had a line in one of his songs. It was originally from Rumi. There is a crack in everything, and that's where the light gets through. And I remember having the experience where I began to see how all my life I'd shown up to people with an idea of who I was. I didn't like that person very much. Because I didn't like that person very much, what I used to try to do was control people's experience of me. So I would show up for a conversation either at work or family, and I would have a dialogue running in my head about, do they like me? Do they like what I'm saying? How can I make them like me? How can I please them? And all my life I remember having difficulty engaging with people. And what I saw, what the crack, the light shining through showed me was that this dialogue that I had in my head, this thinking, this life that I'd created in my head, and the fact that I wasn't worthy, I wanted to be worthy. All this stuff going on in my head was the exact thing that was getting in the way of me connecting to people. The light that came in through the crack showed me that eventually that underneath all that stuff and underneath all that thinking about that creation that I'd made of the person that I thought I was, underneath all that was this love and compassion, which automatically meant I was already connected to people. Already, I didn't have to do anything. We keep saying that in this, don't we? We keep saying we don't have to do anything, and it sounds, I didn't understand. I understood it intellectually for a long time, but I really got a sense that I am you. If I am you, you are me, we are already connected. There is nothing we have to do. And underneath all the thinking, what's true, what never changes is that there's just love and compassion. That's the thing that doesn't change. Everything else comes and goes, formless to form, back to formless again. The thing that stays the same is that connection, that love, that compassion.
One of my favourite quotes is from Jack Pransky when he says, "All we are is love, peace and wisdom, with the capacity to create the illusion that we are not." And that's such a, for me, a very powerful and yet again really simple reminder that when I'm not there, then I'm off with the fairies that live in my head, or the goblins, or the monsters. So it reminds me, the feeling of that, it's nothing to get het up about. I mean, I have my moods, they're not terrible, but I have my moods. But when I'm there, it's like they were saying this morning, you've got more of a sense of that's where you are. And whereas in the past I'd have been trying to change it, fix it, and I'd be berating myself for not being this super, really loving mother all the time. Now it's more of, yeah, I've got this feeling right now, and it's reminding me, again, the simplicity of, I don't need to speak out of this. Nothing's that urgent. I don't have to act out of this. There's nothing to do. And the two things that are so true as well is it will pass, and it's not true. They ain't necessarily so. And that the idea of it passing when you're in it is ridiculous. Because it is really, really real. And it doesn't look like it's going to pass. And sometimes I forget my preference for loving kindness and think, yeah, I just forget it. And so it hangs around for as long as it hangs around. But, when you get to my age, there's a lot of proof that things pass. So, but for people who are not yet in this glorious third age, you can look forward to a whole lifetime of a different relationship, a loving relationship with yourself and with other people. Which bit? Good.
So, I guess having a sense of who we really are changes everything. Changes our relationship to the world, how we view the world. And it also changes how we relate to other people. So I remember when I very first came to the principles, again around the time that Sue told me it was all a cult, I was looking after my dad, he was quite advanced in his years. He would have been sort of like mid-90s, I suppose, at the time. And through one instance or another, I was called on to care for him for about 15 years. Now, my dad and I had a difficult relationship over the 50-odd years that I'd known him. And my dad came from a generation of people in Poland that had seen an awful lot of difficulties, fought in the Second World War, and he had seen some unimaginable things to me. However, I guess a lot of his attitudes, his preferences, his views on life didn't really match my liberated, perfect idea of how people should be. So we kind of had a difficult relationship for a long time. Then I was called upon to look after him, and how that looked to me was I would go and visit him a few times a week in his home, and I would do shopping, cleaning, washing, whatever needed to be done. Cook for him sometimes. But my dad was in the early stages of dementia. He had colon cancer, various other bits and pieces. He was falling apart physically. So he would be sitting in his chair all day, be watching television, and he would. What I realised now was that he was sitting there in the feeling of his thinking, and he was getting all this input from the world that was really horrible to him. You know, he saw things that were happening in the world, he saw how people were behaving, and he disapproved of so much of it, and he was so caught up in it. So when I would go and visit him, I would sit in front of him and he would just let it all go. I would sit in front of him. He was so caught up in it. He would like spit. You know? He made lists of stuff that he wanted to get off his chest. So there was all this stuff about the world, and there was all this stuff about me, and some stuff about my sister. And there was his dementia, and then his falling apart physically, and this went on for a good few years. And one of the first things I learned when I came to the principles was about listening deeply. And I realised that what I'd been doing was I would stand outside the door, think, okay, I'm here to help. I want to serve him. I'm going to put up with whatever I have to put up with. I don't have to like it, but I'll just do what I have to do. And I realised that what I had been doing was I'd been showing up with this idea of who I was, this idea of who he was, with this agenda in my head of how all I'm going to do is make him feel as comfortable as I can. I'm going to fix him because he needs fixing, obviously. And we would have these conversations. Well, he would shout at me, and I would say, "No, Dad, no, it's okay. You know, you can you can go to the doctors, and when you go to the hospital, you know, they do know how to deal with your false teeth. You know, you won't have to have problems, you know, sort of with various going to the toilet and stuff like that. So I would try and put his mind at ease for 2 hours at a time, and I could never work out why it never helped. So when I began to see the crack and the light coming in about who I was, about who he was, I decided to test the theory, and I decided to show up and not fix it. I decided to listen as deeply as I could without having any of the prejudices that I had about the way he viewed the world. I just decided to try and listen to what was behind the words. Now, this is very early for me. All I knew was that's what I should do. I didn't really know what I was doing. So we sat there for 2 hours, and this was, to me, absolute proof of the principles in action. Because we set out on the conversation. My dad would have a lot of difficulty with finding the right words because of his dementia, which fed his frustration, and that would in turn create anger. So while we sat there for 2 hours, I decided to just listen. And listen for the feeling behind the words. And what happened amazingly to me was that very slowly, without me interrupting him, interjecting, trying to fix him all the time, very, very naturally what happened was his mind, which was doing that, very, very slowly began to get quieter. And we went from things that I'd done wrong for years to things that were wrong in the world to what it was like for him and his family when he was a child, and what it was like in the war, which he'd never spoken about. It was a prisoner of war. Very slowly, as he quieted down, and I allowed him to quieten down, he was talking about his sister who just died, and by the end of 2 hours I found myself, I don't remember doing it, I found myself sitting in front of him, like holding his hand, and he was crying, and he said something to me that blew me away. He just said, I didn't know you could love me so much. He'd never used the word love in a conversation with me before. And coincidentally, as he slowed down, he began to find the words. His dementia seemed to dissolve a little bit. And what I heard in the conversation was not his anger and his frustration, his views on the world, or even the nice things. What I heard was the absolute fear that he had in him. And with that recognition of what he was feeling, came such a wave of compassion from me, such a wave of love, which changed everything again. I wasn't just listening not to fix him, I fell in love with him after 56 years. And I tell you, that was such an amazing experience for me, that he had 2 more years before he died. That 2 years we had the most beautiful relationship, and he died in such peace. I could be with him, I could show up with him, I could be the love and connection that was already there. I just didn't know it. I just didn't know it.
That was really powerful, beautiful. I'm so pleased for you. One of the things that I laboured under the delusion of was that there was a right way for things to look. So relationships had a look, they had a form, and I'd know it when I achieved it. So I had a picture in my mind, and then so I was constantly trying to make my relationships fit the picture in my mind. And that's really difficult, and it's not nice for other people who are in that relationship with you. Because what they don't realise is you're trying to change them at the same time as you're trying to change yourself, and it's a world apart from what you've just described. And I think as that misunderstanding has cleared itself up, because thank goodness it wasn't left to me to do, because I tried for years and years. The misunderstanding cleared itself up. I realised that it's all in this moment. There isn't a future. It isn't about the past. It's all in this moment of, sometimes it's a gentle navigation when things get a bit tricky. Sometimes it's the easiest, most beautiful, really doing nothing kind of feeling, just being with another person. It's not about the words, not about the circumstances. It's just being in that moment. And so I have a rather less beautiful story, really. Just recently, Peter said to me, it was time we got our accounts done, we need to get those to the accountant. And I already then, at that point, really felt annoyed with him, and I felt my whole body going, oh God, here we go again. I'm going to look so stupid. I'm not going to be able to explain how I can make a mess of the most simple figures you can imagine. So we sat down, and I thought I'd got them ready. I thought, well, that'll just do. Sat down, and the very first question annoyed the hell out of me, because it was something like, how did you reach that figure there? And do you remember at school when you got the answer right, but they made you show the working? Well, I knew I hoped that figure was right, and he wanted to see the working, and I was just really angry with him at that point. So you're making this really difficult for me, and you already know it's really difficult for me. And he said something like, well, you don't have to be so sharp with me. And that's the pivotal moment for me. That was the pivotal moment for me, because I realised, no, I don't. You're absolutely right. I do not have to be sharp with you. And in that moment, I had a sort of recognition that I have a choice how I navigate this, how I proceed with this. And in that moment I saw, for goodness sake, he's helping me. He's not interrogating me, he's not judging me, he wants this to work out, of course. So that didn't mean that we had great fun that evening and most of the next morning, sloshing back wine and going, oh, look, we should do this more often. Not at all. It was step by step, letting that feeling go, that was my feeling that I was creating about being dumb around accounts. I don't think I'm dumb about maths generally, but it's just something about that. I'm actually thinking I could diagnose myself and everything would be all right. I'm just a bit rubbish at organising figures. There must be a condition that I can claim for that one. I'll speak to you later, Tom. And I mean, obviously this is only one side of the story, but I am so grateful that evening and the most of the next morning, we kept returning to a peaceful place. And I could see his frustration. And in the past, I'd have written a really, really, really quick story about that, how wrong, how ridiculous, and how kind I am when he's blah, blah, blah. And even if those thoughts came up, I'd just, so what? Like recognising your own tea party in your head with people you didn't even invite. I mean, that's the annoying bit. I'm going to let that go now. But it is, it's a tea party going on up there, and sometimes they get drunk on it, which is quite something. So that's a small instance of how, I guess, that preference for a kind relationship, that preference for seeing beyond all of those things that can suddenly present themselves as possibilities. And all of them can look really real, and all of them can look fixed, and they can look true. And the truth is, the only one that becomes your experience is the one that you choose to breathe life into. I have to say, even the glimpse of that has transformed. I mean, that's one small example. Obviously, all my family relationships are totally transformed. Anyway, so, should we, I'd like to have a conversation now with him.
I told you we had a difficult relationship. Didn't take long, did it?
It's not necessarily got to be a question, it could be a
What
story.
are you noticing? What are you noticing? What's coming up?
I absolutely loved your story, and what I loved about it was it connected me immediately into a very deep part of myself. And for me, one of the biggest teachings has been when I've connected with people as they're dying. And it is one of the most pure moments of being completely present and completely who you are, because nobody's playing any games. And it reminds me of a story that a teacher told many years ago called Ramdas, who did very similar to his father. He chose to take care of his father, and he developed, had a really difficult relationship. But it's like the power that when you can have that bridge and that real connection is beyond words. I didn't really want anything else after that story. It's like it's just incredibly powerful. So thank you.
It gave me also, that experience gave me the gift of seeing how all my other relationships played out. I've always had quite a difficult relationship with my sister. In my head, I thought she knew she knew my buttons to push since we were that big. And that's how our relationship played out for 50 odd years. She's older than me, so my story was she bullied me, she had these buttons she pushed, and I was just waiting to hear her hit the button, and then I would react. I'd take action based on the thinking I was having in the moment. So it was such a powerful gift to be able to see how that person I thought I was, and didn't like very much, reacted to everybody in my life. And to see how differently it played out when there was less of me there. There was less of that egomaniac person, and more of the bigger thing that we all are. Coming to those situations with love, compassion, even when my sister was pushing my buttons. It made it even if the other person doesn't appear to change, when we show up in that space, the energy changes, and the relationship has to change when we show up in that space. Because again, what we've done is we've seen the crack, we've seen the light that's coming in, we can't not see it. It changes everything. It's Jack.
I love both of your stories because they point to something that many of us don't really understand, and that's listening to understand instead of listening to answer. And in that, you're given this invitation to respond and not react. And that was just beautiful. Thank you.
I really liked what you were saying about the choice that we had. You know, I remember, like, I went through a long relationship and it ended with, you know, someone, my partner at the time cheating on me. But there was this moment, and this was before I'd met the principles, where I was like, well, I have a choice. I can have compassion and I can see that everyone's human and we all make mistakes, or I can be angry. I know it's not, I know that this person still loves me and their intention wasn't to hurt me. So let go of that story of poor me. And it was interesting as well, the reaction of other people. Everyone expects you to be, why aren't you more angry? Why aren't you? And then you think, yeah, I'm not going to take this line down. Yeah, I'm not going to, you know, and you think, well, actually, no, I have a choice. You know, and I think, and I see that again, and then when I, you know, kind of got more introduction through principles, I see it again in other relationships, you know, where it's like, actually, you can let go of that. I can let go of the story of, oh, my brother's never in touch with me. Well, you know what? He's not good at communicating. Done. That's it. It's okay. I don't need to carry that. I don't need to be angry. I don't need to, you know, and I think that having that choice is so lovely. Being able to see that, you know, when you're in the moment and just being like, you know what? I can choose how I approach this, you know, and having compassion, you know, I think it's such a nice gift that we can have.
It reminds me of what Jack was saying. It's the power we have. It's not the power over anything. It's not about control. Where I see it's just exactly as you've described it, is that's what we have. We have the power to create a reality, so a bit of choice in there is really helpful. And wise. And there's a lot of common sense in it. So we can bring those couple of things down to earth, can't we? It's not like wisdom. It's like, no, wisdom in the moment. That's what we
It
are.
makes sense. You know, it's like once I start going, oh, well, you know what, there's love, and there's all this other anger stuff, it's like, well, that's so much easier. The love is so much easier. The letting go is feels so much more comfortable. And that's where I think like that wisdom comes in. It's just like, there's no, you can't go, well, I can be really angry, or I can just be at peace. Well, there's no, it makes sense. You know? You can't always get there, but you know, immediately. But it's just so simple in that way sometimes. You know.
I don't think you can get there at all before what Stef was saying about the crack. Like something's got to give in the story of I can't do this, or this person should do that. Once the crack appears, and I think the crack sometimes looks like a recognition of, oh, it's one of many versions of a story I could write. It's one of many books, because some of us are better at writing long things. And then they're solid and you put them on a shelf, and then they're really real. But that's a kind of idea, I think, that so it's not so much, you know, like this idea of letting go of things. I always used to struggle with that. Well, how do you do that? Because actually it's almost impossible for me to let go when I'm in it. But when you see that it's a story, and it's not so solid, and it's changing all the time, well, it isn't like a doing, is it? It goes. It's almost like it lets go of you, because it goes, oh, time up, I'm out.
Yeah.
And then the new one comes along and you think, oh, thinks she's clear. Try this one. Because that's the other beautiful thing, I think, is that these thoughts, as Jenny said, that they're infinite, aren't they? There's this infinite world is thought. So we don't have to really worry about letting a thought pass by, because it's not like there's going to be this vacuum and suddenly we're going to shouldn't have let that one go. It's just not, it doesn't work like that, and we all know that because we've all lived like that, haven't we? you get lost for words and sometimes you're thoughtless, but that doesn't mean that there isn't this infinite source of thought and creativity. And I would just like to say that after all these years of, well, you've seen some of it, there's like, oh, shall I do this or shall I do that? That looks like it's quite important work, but really that's also important work, you know, schools, business, blah, blah, blah. And most recently, I have a new business partner, Gillian. I'm so glad you're here, Jill. And I would just like to say that in terms of relationships, working relationships and friend relationship as well, hasn't it been extraordinarily light and fun and playful? And in that space, we can hardly contain the ideas that are coming. You know, that there's no limit. I keep mentioning Bali. I've no idea, I've never particularly wanted to go there, but I've got a feeling that it could happen. So that feels really different to me, labouring to create the kind of relationship with somebody to work with or the relationship with somebody to live with. It just appeared from nowhere.
Appeared from a conversation, so,
Yeah.
you know, and I just went, that sounds interesting. And we've just had conversations and it's grown, and as you say, it's just been so easy. And for me, it's been a proof of when I get out of the way and go, this is a really cool idea, and don't do the, oh, but I couldn't possibly do that. But just go, this could be fun, let's play with it, let's be naughty with it, let's have fun with it. That is such a hugely different space from, you see, the business. Like, you know, Dave, you've got to be really serious about this, must do sex and certain. Let's just see what this form, this idea thing that we have comes into being. And, you know, it's almost like our foundation for this whole thing is, well, we're going to have fun as well as the people that are attracted to come and join us. And that's kind of like the level that we operate.
It hasn't really been a doing, has it? There's been lots of action, but it hasn't felt like I've had to make myself behave in a certain way in order to have that experience. It's just, it has become more natural. And you know when it's natural because there's ease and there's ease and a nice feeling. Stories?
It's just when you say is it Leonard Cohen who said that? Yeah.
I think it was in one of his songs, and he
Yeah.
took it from a quote from Rumi, I think.
There's a crack in everything. That's where the light gets in. And there was a client once who said, he said something. We've been speaking for one session, and he said, "At least I can see now how there's a light at the end of the tunnel, and it's like the same image." And I could see when he said it, like, it was really clear to me that there is only that light. That's who we really are, and then there's the darkness, the tunnel, or the whatever, and that is what we make up with thought. And when we tend to do this just a little less because we get a glimpse that it's our own creation, the ease comes in, the lightness comes in just a little more because it was already there and it was us.
Yeah.
And it knows how to run the world, which my personal mind doesn't, but it thought it had to. So I just really like that metaphor
Yeah.
and resonate with it.
So beautiful.
It points to so much more than the words.
It does. I think as you were talking there, I was thinking to myself, it's like being in a dark cellar where I spent most of my life looking for some relief from the darkness, but all I could see was darkness. I couldn't see the darkness. And then there is an insight, there's a shift, something happens, and I see just a crack of light. And even if there's no information from the light, to me it feels like hope when there wasn't hope before. Even if it's just hope, hope seems to me to change everything. Where there was no hope, where there was just darkness. This is how life is, this is how it's always going to be, to, oh. So perhaps there is a different way of seeing this. Perhaps there is some light at the end of the tunnel. Just having that and nothing else seems for me to change everything.
And it looked, that cellar looked so solid to me before, because I thought it was out there in the world and it was in me, and it was so natural to look for something to change it, and it felt so natural that of course to change it would take effort and time and a lot of things from me, and to see in a moment that there never were a cellar,
Yeah.
but for my own thinking,
Yeah.
suddenly opens up a whole new world of possibility for change that I would have never even dreamed of, and certainly wasn't pointed towards with my psychology education. We were educated into trying to step by step making a little more space in the basement,
Yeah.
and suddenly it wasn't there. That's the whole of the principle.
That's beautiful. Thank you. Good morning.
Somebody told me, this is just a little, I kind of offer it as a reminder in a way, because it was a really nice little reminder to me, because a while back I listened to somebody, and it was a very, very interesting and profound talk, but the thing that I heard from it was lighten up. That's what I took away from it. I was saying, yes, lighten up. But anyway, so there's this person looking after two small children. I think they were something like 3 and 5. And she's not experienced with children. They are niece and nephew. And so she's saying that she was really struggling with them, because now it was bedtime and she had to get them ready, and she had a lot of thinking about, got to get the pajamas on, got to get them washed, got to get the teeth done, got to get to bed, it's getting late. And all they would do is rolling about the floor laughing, and they having a really nice time. But it was bedtime. And so there's always that navigation, isn't there? Because there is a bedtime. So she splits them up. She's right, you sit there, and she, now you come and you do your teeth. So he's kind of starting to do his teeth, laughing the whole time, and he suddenly throws his head back and looks at her and says, "Aren't you allowed to have fun?" I just think it's priceless. Whoever said, and I can tell you, I'm making up for lost time. You know, and you can do that, because it's only ever now, isn't there? So that's a contradiction. You can't make up lost time if there's only now. But you know what I mean? It's kind of like, this is enough, this is good enough. Sod the history. It's gone. It's not even, it's only just a memory.
Talking about children, when my son was about 2 and the playgroup and everybody were trying to potty train and get them to sleep and all the rest of it. And there'd be endless discussions about the best way to do it. And I just let my son go. I never, ever brought any of these things up with him. And he literally just stopped. I realised he was dry, and he was dry at night. Took his nappies off during the day, you know, that sort of thing. And it was the same with his needing, Americans call it a dummy. He just literally threw it away. He didn't bother with it. And and I said this one day, and they said, "Oh, well, that's because he's not quite right, isn't he?" I mean, he didn't have quite the awareness of the other things. It was simply because I hadn't bothered with him. I'd simply let him do it in his own time. And he did it before everybody else. There was no endless hours. There was no trying to train. It was just amazing. I love it so. But it was fun. Living with him was fun. And I think I can safely say those 2 years, 3 years, the best times of my life. Yeah, I'm now speaking again. Which is nice, really nice. But going back to death or to near death, or my mum was poorly and she was in a coma, and I just massaged her head, and she actually came out of the coma, and she said, I had an impression that somebody loved me, and what I got from that was, oh great, I cracked it. She's going to love me now. My mother's going to actually care about me. And I think I spent the last 20 years trying to make her care for me. I'm caring for her obviously now. And that's what I'm doing. Every time she says she doesn't want what I want to give her or do for her, is a rejection of me completely. Absolutely kicking me back. I don't want you around me. I don't want anything to do with you. I don't want anything. And I got that from the last session that you had. That I've spent the last 20 years trying to make her love me. It ain't going to happen in this way. It isn't going to happen. I cannot make her. I cannot. And it doesn't matter how much care I give her. I can't. It's the same with my father. They're both very independent. So life's hard work. He's nearly blind, he can hardly walk, but he still goes up ladders. I'll go up onto the roof, he goes up onto the roof. My mother, who can't walk without any aid whatsoever, will start walking around the house. And I think part of it is independence from me. They're actually going in the opposite direction so that they don't feel they're so vulnerable and old. And if I let go a bit, I realise perhaps I wouldn't need to do all of that. So I'm still struggling with that. Go on, no, please, finish. Yes.
My experience with my dad, my sister, and my ex-wife.
Yeah.
To me, there's a real comfort and peace to know that underneath this construct we make about how life should work, how life should be, about who we are, underneath all that, the one thing that doesn't change is that we're not separate. And that love is already there, has always been there. Always. And I saw how much noise I was paying attention to about my thinking, how I think things should be, and when I saw that, I paid less attention to the noise and more attention to the signal underneath it, that place of pure consciousness, that place of who we really are, and who my dad really was, who my sister really is, underneath all this construct about what we think life should look like, who we are. All the time, there is just that peace, love, compassion. That doesn't change. There's a real comfort to be had with that.
Can I answer to that? Can I add to that, Stef? I love what you said, or what just jumped into my head as you saying that was, it's just not true. She doesn't love you.
Probably not. But probably not. And this is not, again, this is not right or wrong there. My thoughts have been a long time there, that's all I can say. My feelings, my thoughts, and getting rid of them is the hard part. Because in a way it doesn't matter whether she loves me or doesn't love me. My reaction to it does matter. And because I'm a grown woman, it really doesn't matter.
So what I saw was it's all thought getting in the way. It's just all thought.
Yeah.
Your thoughts and her thoughts getting in the way.
Yeah. And my mother's probably reacting to what she thinks about her mother. Do you know what I mean? Somebody loves her. And I'm obviously thinking, I've picked that up from her. And it just goes on, it's a vicious circle until somebody is brave enough to break it. And today, I've got a little of that. I really have got a little of that. I'm going to be okay. Mum's going to be okay.
That's the light.
Yeah.
It's the crack and that's the light.
I'm just reminded of what Jack's started off the morning saying, that there is nothing out there that needs to impede us living in our total love and compassion. So it's like the relationship is with our thinking, and it looks like it's with the other person. So we have expectations, and we have hopes, and we have disappointments, and all of that. But at the end of the day, the life that we live is our creation. So really, in a way, when you say it doesn't matter, what I hear is it's not essential to get payback or feedback or have the story the way we want it to look. Because we can experience love. We are love. We can experience ourselves, we can experience the love that we are. And who knows? Because it's unknown. People do what they do. People who are who they think they are. So here am I, this is who I think I am, and here is you, and this is who you think. I'd quite like to meet without all that. So the more that this falls away, the more opportunity there is to meet not the story, but the person. And then when you get there, when you have those moments, you realise, oh, that was always there, but for the story. Sorry, Matty, you were going to say something.
I was just wanted to speak to the same thing. Like, what really shifted for me in relationships with starting to having insights on the principles was when I realized that what I was searching out there, I already was. So I thought, because that's what you do, make up stories, I thought that there was something I wasn't and that I needed it from the outside. So it was so important what the other persons did, because I needed their love. I needed them to love me. And when I realized this cosmic joke, hello, you are made of love, honey, you don't need anything, I'm like, oh my God. And then I could just hang out. And hang out with people and enjoy being with them or not being with them or whatever. That's speaking to the light again. I thought it was out there.
Now, as official timekeeper, I cannot. Oh dear, failed again. So, thank you ever so much.
Bless you.
Thank you for being here.